There's a pattern in history that has caused three big world powers to fall in the last 500 years. And right now, in 2025, the United States seems to be moving through that same pattern step by step and choice by choice, almost like we re-following the same script that ended badly every time before. In the late 1500s, Spain was the richest empire in the world. They held huge amounts of gold and silver, their army was strong, and their money was trusted everywhere. But within about 80 years, Spain went broke and became a weaker country that never fully recovered. Then, in 1914, Britain controlled the biggest empire the world had ever seen. People used to say the sun never set on the British Empire because their land was spread across so many parts of the world. There is a blueprint for collapse. A hidden pattern, written not in prophecy, but in the cold, hard ledger of history. It is a 7-stage sequence that has, without fail, dismantled every global superpower that ever existed. This pattern is not a theory. It is an autopsy report. And right now, the United States of America is not approaching this pattern. We are deep inside it. We have already quietly passed 5 of the 7 stages. This is the story of how empires die, why they always believe they are the exception, and why the terrifying repeating math of history says we are next. This is the 7-stage collapse pattern, why the USA is now entering stage 5 just like Spain. Britain and the USSR, let's be clear, imperial collapse does not begin with a bang. It doesn't start with invading armies or mushroom clouds. It begins with a whisper, the slow, silent hemorrhage of economic vitality. It starts when the empire stretches so far beyond its own bones that it can no longer feel the brakes. When it maintains armies across 150 countries, fights wars on multiple fronts, makes promises it cannot possibly keep, and owes debts it can never, ever repay. At first, everything seems normal. The money still spends. The ships still sail. The speeches still echo with confidence. But beneath the polished surface, the foundation is turning to sand. Resources flow to the wrong places. The capacity to make things, to build things, withers. The best minds, the restless and the brilliant, begin to look for an exit. Then the slide becomes a plummet. Allies start to glance sideways, making quiet backup plans. Adversaries begin to test the fences, probing for weakness. Trading partners, once dependent, start crafting alternatives. And that ultimate privilege, the reserve currency, begins to rust. Suddenly, your greatest strengths become your fatal vulnerabilities. Your currency, once hoarded by the world, comes flooding back home in a tsunami of worthless paper. Your military, stretched across the globe, becomes an unsustainable chain of empty fortresses. Your promises, once backed by indisputable might, become empty echoes in a gathering storm. This is not a dark fairy tale. This is the precise, documented reality for 3 former superpowers. Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. They did not fall to a superior force. They collapsed from within, hollowed out by the same set of catastrophic decisions America is making right now. They believed their power was permanent. They overextended their military to the breaking point. They debased their lifeblood, their currency. And they refused to see the truth until the ceiling was already crashing down. Let's begin with the original ghost in the machine, the Spanish Empire, the 16th and 17th centuries. Picture this: after Columbus, Spain became the first true global hegemon. It conquered the Aztec and Inca empires, seizing control of mountains of silver and rivers of gold. The Spanish real was the dollar of its age, the global reserve currency. The entire world ran on Spanish silver. King Philip II sat atop a flood of wealth unimaginable to any monarch before him. And with that wealth came a fatal belief that the money would never run out. Stage 1, military overextension. Philip's Spain didn't have enemies. It had a list. Simultaneous wars against the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, against France and Italy, against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, against the rising English Navy, and conflicts from the Philippines to the Americas. The Spanish military was a hungry beast consuming half of all state revenue, and still, it was never enough. Stage 2, currency debasement. So they cheated. They began mixing cheap copper into the legendary silver coins. A coin stamped as pure silver became 50% copper, then 75%. The face value was a lie. The real value evaporated. Merchants, sensing the decay, demanded more coins for the same goods. Inflation, a then nameless plague, exploded. They were literally dissolving their own credibility, coin by coin. Stage 3, the debt spiral. Even with all the silver, they couldn't cover the bills. They borrowed massively from European bankers. And when they couldn't pay, they simply declared bankruptcy. In 1557, 1560, 1575, 1596, 4 times in 40 years. Each time they promised reform. Each time they borrowed more and spent faster. It was a Dick cycle with an empire as the patient. Stage 4, the hollowing out. Here is the tragic irony that doomed Spain. All that treasure destroyed them. When unlimited money pours in, why bother to build? Spanish nobility saw work as beneath them. Why grow food when you can import it from France? Why weave textiles when you can buy superior cloth from the Netherlands? Spain became a colossal funnel. New World silver flowed in one side and straight out the other to pay for the goods of their rivals. They produced nothing but debt and bureaucracy. The muscle of the empire atrophied, leaving only fat and bone. Stage 5, social decay. As the economy crumbled, the social fabric tore, streets filled with beggars. The ambitious and skilled fled to France, England, the Netherlands, houses that were building. What remained was a calcified society of administrators, soldiers, and clergy, a nation consuming its past with no future being created. By 1700, the empire was a hollow shell. The superpower that dominated the globe became, within a century, a secondary player. Today, Spain is a beautiful museum of its former self, a lesson in how the swiftest rise can lead to the most permanent fall. The Spanish blueprint was written 400 years ago. And 300 years later, a new empire, one where the sun never set, would pick up that same blueprint and follow it, line for doomed line. The story of Britain proves this pattern is not a fluke, it is a trap. And when we return, you'll see how the 20th century greatest empire made the exact same mistakes, and how its collapse points directly to our own looming crisis. By the dawn of the 20th century, the British Empire was the zenith of human power. It controlled a quarter of the Earth's land and a quarter of its people. The pound sterling was the language of global trade. London was the beating financial heart of the world. They stood where America stands today, believing their system was the permanent end of history. But they were already deep in the sequence, replaying Spain's tragedy with industrial age consequences. Stage 1, the overstretched lion. Britain's military commitments were planetary. From India to Africa, the Middle East to the Pacific, they were the world's policemen. The cost was staggering, but manageable until the gears of history caught fire. World War I presented a devil's choice: stay neutral and watch the European order shatter, or fight and bankrupt the empire to preserve it. They chose to fight. The cost was over $1 trillion in today's dollars. Crucially, they borrowed that money from the United States. The creditor became the debtor. They won the war, but they had mortgaged their future. Stage 2, debasement of trust. The pound was meant to be as good as gold. But the war had drained Britain's gold reserves across the Atlantic to pay for arms. In 1925, in a move of catastrophic pride, they returned to the gold standard at the pre-war exchange rate. It was a fantasy. The pound was now artificially overvalued. British exports became too expensive for the world. Factories shut down, unemployment soared. To defend this fantasy currency, they strangled their own economy with high interest rates. In 1931, the fantasy broke. Britain abandoned gold. The pound sterling, the bedrock of global finance, lost a quarter of its value overnight. The first crack in the imperial armor had become a canyon. Stage 3, the inescapable spiral. Then came World War II, another cataclysmic expense, more borrowing from America. By 1945, Britain's debt to the US and Canada was larger than its entire annual economic output. They had won, again, but the empire was a phantom. It could no longer be paid for nor defended, the muscle was gone. Only the weight remained. Stage 4, the empire slips away. in 1947, with shocking swiftness, they let go of India, the jewel in the crown, the economic engine of empire for 200 years. It was not a gracious retreat. It was a financial necessity. Then came the dominoes: Africa, the Middle East, Asia. Within 2 decades, the map that was once drenched in imperial red faded to a pale pink island. The empire vanished from the world, surviving only in nostalgia and textbooks. Stage 5. Currency to curiosity. The pound's fall was a slow-motion car crash. In 1940, £1 equaled over $4. By the 1970s, it was $2.30. Today, it wobbles around $1.27. The global reserve currency became just another forex trade. Britain clung to the relics of power: a UN Security Council seat, nuclear weapons, a special relationship with America. But the truth was evident to all: they were now a junior partner, a living museum to lost greatness. The pattern had consumed another superpower. But history wasn't finished teaching the lesson. Just as Britain faded, a new challenger arose, one that swore it had broken the historical code. A superpower built not on gold but on ideology. And its collapse would be the fastest, most shocking proof that the pattern is merciless and it respects no flags. The Soviet Union looked at the capitalist empires of the past and laughed. They believed they were different, immune to old economic laws. What happened next was the most terrifying demonstration of the collapse pattern in modern history: a death spiral, so rapid it left the world breathless. And the parallels to America today are not just similar, they are screamingly obvious. 1945. The Soviet Union emerged from the ashes of war as a colossus. A superpower with nuclear teeth, a sphere of influence spanning continents, and a defiant belief that their system was the future. For decades, they matched America tank for tank, missile for missile. They projected power across the globe. But beneath the steel and propaganda, the economic body was already in septic shock. They were following the pattern and accelerating. Stage 1. Military overextension on steroids. The USSR spent a crushing 15 to 20% of its entire economy on the military, triple the US burden. They had to match American technology, counter American alliances on every continent. Afghanistan, Cuba, Syria, Vietnam, Africa, everywhere Washington exerted influence. Moscow felt compelled to spend blood and treasure to counter it. They were in a global chess game, but they were paying for it with their children's food. Stage 2. Economic stagnation and rot. By the 1970s, the Soviet economic engine seized. Only oil exports kept the lights on, everything else failed. Central planning produced mountains of useless goods and crippling shortages. Innovation was a crime against the state. A nation with the world's most fertile black soil could not feed itself. They became the world's largest grain importer. The system didn't just misallocate resources. It murdered the very concept of productivity. Stage 3. The currency nobody wanted. The ruble was a joke. It was worthless outside Soviet borders. Even its own citizens didn't trust it, preferring black market dollars whenever possible. To buy anything from the outside world, the Kremlin had to pay in gold or oil-real commodities because nobody would take their paper. When oil prices crashed in the 1980s, the life support machine began to beep. Stage 4. The empire vanishes overnight. In 1989, the Berlin Wall didn't just fall, it evaporated. And with it, the entire Soviet imperial periphery: Poland, Hungary, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, all broke free in a matter of months. The strategic depth that took decades to build vanished in a single season. The Soviet state was too bankrupt, too exhausted to even raise a hand to stop it. Stage 5. The final, sudden implosion. Then the unthinkable. Not in centuries, not in decades, in 900 days. From the fall of the Berlin Wall to the dissolution of the Soviet Union on December 26, 1991, a superpower with 30,000 nuclear weapons simply ceased to exist. No foreign invasion, no great war, it died of internal economic hemorrhage. The military couldn't be paid. The government stopped functioning. The currency became wallpaper. The pattern had completed its work with brutal surgical speed. And this is what should freeze your blood. Because the United States is now entering stage 5, we have followed the same footsteps, one by one, into the same quicksand. The American reckoning, stage 1, we are overextended. 750 military bases in 80 countries. Troops in 150 nations. Treaties that pledge us to defend half the planet. Our $850 billion military budget is a titanic sum. Yet, we are stretched so thin that a conflict in Taiwan, a flare-up in Europe, and a crisis in the Middle East would break our strategic back. We are the Spaniard fighting in Flanders, the Briton trying to hold Suez, the Soviet in Afghanistan all at once. Stage 2, we are debauching our currency. Since Nixon severed the dollar from gold in 1971, we have printed with abandon. The money supply has exploded by 400% since 2000. We are not mixing copper with silver. We are creating digital billions with a keystroke. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power in half a century. The mechanism is digital, but the sin is ancient. Stage 3. Our debt spiral is terminal. $36 trillion. An amount so vast it is celestial. We now spend over $1 trillion a year just on interest, more than our entire military budget. We are borrowing money to pay the interest on money we've already borrowed. This is the financial equivalent of a snake eating its own tail. Spain defaulted. Britain surrendered. The USSR imploded. The spiral is tightening. Stage 4. We are a hollow economy. We don't make things anymore. We've offshored our productive soul to China, Mexico, Vietnam. We run an $800 billion annual trade deficit. We are dependent on foreign supply chains for everything from antibiotics to advanced semiconductors, even for critical defense components. Like Spain, we are a conduit. Dollars flow out, cheap goods flow in, and our own industrial heartland rusts in silence. Stage 5. Our society is decaying. Look around. Crumbling cities, fractured politics, a fatal crisis of trust. Record deaths of despair, a collapsing birth rate. The skilled and ambitious are opting out. This is not cyclical downturn. This is the social corrosion that always accompanies imperial decline. The lights are still on, but the corrosion is in the wires. We are here right now at the precipice of stage 5, but the pattern has 2 final fatal stages. What comes next is the point of no return, the moment the world stops believing in the empire's magic. When we return for the final part, we will examine stage 6 and 7, the stages that Spain, Britain, and the USSR could not survive. And the evidence is mounting that America's turn is coming sooner than anyone thinks. We stand where history's superpowers have always stood before the fall, deep in denial at stage 5. We tell ourselves the old stories of exceptionalism. We're different, we have innovation. We have the dollar, so said Spain with its silver, Britain with its navy, the Soviets with their ideology. The pattern does not care, it is a gravitational force. And stages 6 and 7 are where gravity wins. Stage 6, the loss of reserve currency status. This is the trigger. The moment the privilege that allowed all the other excesses is revoked. It begins not with a war, but with a quiet conversation in a foreign treasury. In a lie, perhaps Saudi Arabia, perhaps South Korea decides to quietly diversify its reserves out of dollars. A trading bloc like the BRICS nations creates a new mechanism to settle trades in their own currencies. Central banks, sensing the wind shift, start stockpiling gold at a record pace. These are not hostile acts. They are acts of survival. The world starts to build a lifeboat, and the dollar is no longer the only seat on it. Imagine the effect. Trillions of dollars held overseas begin to look for a way home because they are no longer needed for global trade. They flood back into the US, chasing goods that we no longer produce in abundance. Inflation, which we thought was under control, becomes a wildfire. To fight it, the government is forced to raise interest rates to apocalyptic levels, crashing the bond market, the housing market, the stock market, everything. The dollar's dominance was our shield. Once cracked, every blow hits home. Stage 7, the collapse. This is not a gradual decline. It is a cardiac arrest. When the reserve currency fails, it pulls the pin on every other grenade. The debt spiral, the military overstretch, the social fracture, it happens with breathtaking speed. Think of the Soviet Union's 900 days. A currency crisis triggers a sovereign debt crisis, which triggers a political crisis. The government can no longer fund its military commitments overseas. Bases close, allies are left exposed, adversaries move. At home, the social contract shatters as pensions vaporize and services collapse. Overnight, the superpower is reduced to a supplicant. The global system it built is now a prison of its own debts. The military, once projecting power across continents, struggles to maintain order at home. The unthinkable becomes the daily headline. This is how empires die, not with a heroic last stand, but with a whimper of default and disintegration. 3 times this pattern is played out. 3 times, the superpower of the age believed it could cheat history. 3 times, history collected its debt in full. The United States has checked the first 5 boxes with chilling precision. The momentum is now built into the system. The sequence is locked. We have spent the last 2 decades, especially since 2020, sprinting through this pattern. Unprecedented money printing, geometric debt accumulation, foreign entanglements we cannot untangle. A culture deeply divided against itself. We are not drifting toward the waterfall. We have paddled into the current. Can we stop it? The pattern says the time for gentle course correction is long past. The reforms required would be monumental, painful, and demand a level of political unity and collective sacrifice that seems beyond our current capacity. Maybe America can be the first to break the cycle, maybe, but hope is not a strategy. The blueprint is clear. The witnesses Spain, Britain, the USSR are silent testaments in the history books. Your life, your savings, your future are tied to this outcome. This is not alarmism. It is pattern recognition. The storm is no longer on the horizon. The wind is already picking up. If this journey through the 7 stages has changed your perspective, if you now see the cracks in the foundation, then you cannot unsee them. Subscribe to this channel, because as we move into the uncharted territory of Stage 6, you will need clarity, not chaos, understanding, not propaganda. The answers to what comes next aren't hidden. They are etched in the stone of fallen empires. I will help you read them. The past is our warning. Let's not become its next lesson.